Hello and welcome to today's training professional education webinar, Marketing Your Practice Online, Social Media and Beyond, with Helene Sobin, MBA, and Dr. Rebecca Sachs, PhD, ABP. This is the first professional webinar in our career development series. I am Helen Heyman, Director of Programs at ADAA. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You will also find all these tips in the attached go-to-training guide we put together. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio panel and the dial-in information will be displayed. Don't forget to enter your PIN. We will first kindly ask you to mute yourself so that we don't hear any background noise. To mute yourself, you will need to press the gray tab just below the red arrow. Kindly also switch off your webcam. The webcam tab is just below the mute tab. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the chat panel of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. You will also be able to access materials. I would now like to introduce our experts. Ms. Helene Sobin is a highly accomplished marketing and business strategist. She draws upon over 20 years of experience working in the healthcare industry. Ms. Sobin offers strategic practice building support for healthcare professionals, specializing in helping clinicians and physicians attract new clients and optimize their business. With a keen understanding of the unique challenges in marketing mental health services, Ms. Sobin offers tailored solutions for personal branding, social media, website design, and business practices. Ms. Sobin earned her MBA at Northwestern University's Kellogg's Graduate School of Management and her BA from the University of Michigan. She shares her expertise at various conferences, including the ADAA and the Association of Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies. Dr. Rebecca Sachs, PhD, ABP, is a clinical psychologist specializing in the assessment and treatment of individuals on the autism spectrum who also experience difficult co-occurring disorders such as OCD and severe anxiety. Dr. Sachs is board certified in cognitive behavioral therapy and brings warmth, sensitivity, and a strong sense of humor to her work as a licensed clinical psychologist. As a member of Spectrum Services, Dr. Sachs maintains a private practice there in New York City. She was recognized as a rising star by ADA, receiving their CDLP award in 2015. She received her bachelor's degree and PhD from New York University and Hofstra University, respectively, and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Miami. It is a true honor and pleasure to work with these two professionals. I will now pass the screen along to Ms. Sobin and Dr. Sachs.
Oh. Sorry, we're having a little difficulty.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody there, hold on. There we go. Welcome, everybody. It's really nice to be here. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to our webinar today. We're going to be talking about marketing your practice online, social media, and beyond. And I am pleased to join Dr. Rebecca Sachs. You heard my whole spiel already, but just so you know, I work with clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, a variety of mental health professionals throughout the country, ranging from small independent practitioners who are just starting out to large multi-specialty practices, and Everyone has very different goals, but the strategies are similar in terms of how to promote your practice. So I'm looking forward to teaching you some things that I think you'll appreciate. Rebecca?
Great. And I'm Rebecca Sachs. Nice to meet you all. I think you heard a little bit about me already. I would probably just add that Helene and I had the pleasure to meet at ADAA a few years ago, and it was really at a transitional time for me when I was moving to full-time private practice. And so I think the goal of today is in some ways to speak personally from the things that I learned and the things that I implemented, and how that can apply to people out there listening. So thanks for joining us today.
All right, so we're going to start out with a concept that many of you probably don't think about too much in terms of your own practices, and that is branding. You know, a lot of clinicians don't think of themselves as selling or branding, but clearly, you know, what I'm going to talk about today is that you actually do have a brand. And so you can look at these logos and recognize all of them, you know, McDonald's, BMW, I don't even need to tell you what they represent. But the important thing to know about branding is that these are more than a logo. So if you think about the experience that you have at McDonald's, your expectations are very different than the experience you're going to have at BMW. You know, you're going to walk into a McDonald's, whether you're in Chicago or Beijing, and have the same experience. You're going to be treated the same way by employees. You're going to have the same type of food. You're going to pay the same price points versus BMW, where you're going to, everything from parking your car to the reception you receive, the service that you're going to get is going to be very different, but again, consistent from BMW dealership to BMW dealership. And so then we talk about, you know, whether people can have brands, because all of you obviously are individuals, and you're selling therapy or mental health in some sort, but you're selling yourself. So here are some people who clearly have strong personal brands. Here's somebody else who has a very strong personal brand, and we're not going to get political here, but I just want to say that, you know, his brand has affected his business as things have changed for Trump properties and things like that. So we're not going to go any further into this because that's not the point of the webinar today. But when we talk about branding, I always start out asking clients, what is it that really makes you unique? You know, what are your strengths? What is the impact that you have on a patient's life? You know, a lot of clinicians like to talk about, I do CBT and DBT and ACT and blah, 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 but you really change lives. And so how is it that you do that? And how is it that you do that in a way that's different than the person across the hall? So when you're talking about marketing yourself, the story you're trying to tell is why you would be a good fit for somebody. So, and this often makes people very uncomfortable when I say, well, what are the adjectives you'd use to describe yourself? And you're not taught to speak like that. So, you know, are you warm and compassionate, funny? You know, what is it, the relationship like that you have that's different? And the experience. So whether it's somebody who parks their car and can't find your office, that's part of your overall brand. And then also very important is, what does your ideal patient look like? And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Rebecca, I know that when we first started, we talked about a lot of these things as you were starting out. You want to jump in with some of your experiences?
Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway from this and thinking about what are these questions I want to ask myself, the difference is not what do I do, but how do I do it? And I know all clinicians have different clinical styles. And we know that's really important when connecting with our patients, given their population or just who we sort of click with. And that would be the thing I would encourage people to really think about and have the takeaway for this is, how do you do therapy? How are you perceived by both individuals or maybe their families if you're working with children as well? And being able to sort of illustrate with words and ideas how you do those things. Because when you're on social media and when you're making a website, you may know how you do therapy differently than one of your colleagues, but then the ability to translate that or illustrate that is going to be really, really important for people to get to know you online before they ever meet you.
Hi, sorry, technical difficulties. Yes, agreed. Great points. So then when we talk about branding your practice, you know, there's things that we want to look at, like your practice name. So obviously those of you who are experienced, have been in practice for a while, you already have a practice name. But in many cases, and Rebecca knows this, I'm not a fan of initials. So if your initials are JLR, I'm not likely to remember JLR, but I might remember your name as John Robinson. And so even if you've come up already with a practice name with initials, it doesn't necessarily describe you. You always want to brand yourself using your name, because people, you want to think about when people are referring to you, are they saying, I want to see Dr. Sachs, or I want to see CBT Spectrum? And so oftentimes it's both. So you want to make sure that your name is very strongly tied to your brand. And then logo design, a lot of people just pick a logo that they like, that looks good. But you really want to think about, you know, what does that mean? What are the feelings that are evoked when you see that logo? That's, again, part of your overall brand. It's very important to be consistent. So many people have forms that look one way and a sign on the front door that looks another way. And you want to create, again, that systematic, consistent experience with your brand. Are there certain fonts that you use? So if somebody picks up a brochure, they're going to know that it's from you. If your business cards they're going to know that it's you again. And a professional headshot, good photography can go a long way. A lot of people, even in their LinkedIn profile, they've got the arm across their friend cut off there, and that's a degree of professionalism. So you want to show yourself in your best light. You also want to be aware of your voice and tone, and this is important when you're doing social media. You want, again, there to be consistency. So a lot of people on their website, they're very clinical, very dry. Again, that's how you've been trained to talk in certain, highfalutin educational language. However, that's not what people want to hear. They're coming to you because they're in pain and they're suffering, and they want you to speak to them. So be aware of that voice that's going to resonate with your potential patients. And then for groups, I always, it's really important, not only your own personal brand, but especially if you're managing a group, you want to make sure everyone is consistent. So everyone's profile has the same description of the practice. Everyone's using the same branding. Their business cards are all the same. Sometimes you have, people who are part-time and such, but when they're representing your organization, you want to be sure that they are representing your brand.
Great. So, just an important thing I'd like to add is when choosing your practice name, just be sure of also the legal realities of when you're choosing a name. I know in New York State, for instance, it's very, very difficult to call yourself an institute or a center for something, that there's just rules. So you may like the sound of a name, but I also encourage people to speak with a lawyer, speak with an accountant, know sort of the local rules and regulations about how you present your business, because that's really important. You don't want to order a letterhead, have great business cards, register for a website, and sort of brand yourself, and then a few months down the line realize, oh, geez, I got to change all that. So that's just one thing I think is a reality that people should be thinking about from the very, very beginning about how they do that, or just picking a name and that may be registered for a business and then representing themselves as a doing business as instead, and making sure you're taking care of that paperwork. The other thing is, if you're like me, a solo practitioner, but in a geographical location where you're in an office that's shared with other practitioners, again, with this consistency, I would think about on social media and beyond, how do you keep sort of your look consistent that lets you stand out in the crowd? That's really what I would say is, how do people, when they see a logo or they see an image, that they automatically think, oh, that's Rebecca Sachs. Like, I can find her office easily that way, that you stand out either online or you stand out physically in your space, but it's a consistent standing out.
Yeah, and that it makes me think another thing about your photo, your professional photo. Especially if you have a common name, it is really important to use a consistent photo, because I've seen people who have, in one place they have a photo from 15 years ago, maybe they didn't look quite the same, and so it's not really clear if it's the same person. And in fact, there's another Rebecca Sachs, PhD, so we talked about this when we started to work together, that we want people to know when they see Rebecca that it's the Rebecca from New York, from Spectrum, so you want to be consistent there and be very aware of that. And if you Google yourself, which we'll talk about later, you could have the same name as some people that you don't want to be confused with. So it's really important to use the same photo repeatedly. So then we talk about a target market. And And the reason this is important is not only can it help you in being successful, but it's really makes marketing much easier. So if you define an ideal patient, who do you like to work with? What are the challenges that you do best with? Who do you have the most success with? What energizes you? What kind of patient energizes you? I had a client who talked about, these are the things I want to promote on my website, and he talked about pandas, which is not something I was familiar with, and he had it everywhere, and then he said, I really don't like working with pandas patients. It's a great time suck, and it's really difficult for me, and I don't feel good about it. And I said, well, take it off. You don't have to say you do everything. You want to talk about what you do well. And if you're in a market where everybody else is doing the same thing, it's going to be much more crowded. It's going to be much more difficult to stand out. So you want to think about a niche that makes sense for you. And that's where Rebecca has had a lot of success.
Yeah. The other thing that I would just add is your target market may shift and evolve as your career shifts and evolves. So just thinking about how you present yourself online, how you think about yourself in general at different parts, like even within a year, I think I noticed that my target market shifted a lot. And just making sure then that as I noticed that trends in my office, and for me what my target market was and how I was visually presenting myself online reflected that shift.
Okay, and so then the importance of identifying that target or that persona, when you can then think about, okay, what is a young adult with anxiety? Where are they going to go for information? So who are their referral sources for that person? And that can then determine who you want to network with, who you want to reach out to. So which type, are there psychiatrists, are there certain type of, pediatricians or primary care or gastroenterologists, school professionals, social workers, relevant organizations, online specialty groups. I had a client who's a pediatrician, and she found a North Shore Moms group. It was a closed Facebook group, and she joined and would just chime in with information occasionally, and that became her largest source of referrals. So if you know where people literally hang out, whether it's socially or physically, that can help you determine, oh, these people tend to be here, maybe I should offer a presentation at this school or in this organization. Obviously, friends' word of mouth is everybody's favorite way of being talked about, and those referrals are going to be most effective, but still everyone is going to look you up online. So be aware that everyone is going to look you up online. And I know, Rebecca, I don't know if you've talked about your niche so much, but part of your niche allowed you to find organizations that have been effective referral sources.
Yes. I would also just add is to think about online networking and to think about networking just within the scope of general networking. I feel like for me to have a successful private practice is I have had to think in some ways like a businesswoman and not just as a clinician, and networking has been so important to me. But what my real takeaway would be for everybody in this webinar is social media is a tool that we can use, and I would say to not think about it as this is going to do the networking for me. You have to think about how you are as a networker in general, and there's really no substitute for real-life in-person connections. So I think it's equally as important as you're connecting online that if you notice that person lives in the same city as you and you happen to connect through Twitter, that then maybe you send them a private message on Twitter and say, would love to meet for coffee. Or if you know that they're active in certain organizations and there's a conference you're going to, you offer to meet for coffee then. I think it just solidifies the activity that you're going to be making on social media even stronger, and will encourage people then to promote your social media presence. I think that's one thing that's hugely important. And also not just thinking about what can people follow and what can I do with my social media presence, but also what can I offer to other professionals out there. And I think that's sort of a general networking rule. When you meet a professional, you don't just say, hey, here's what I can offer your patients. You say, tell me, what kind of patients I could refer to you. What could you offer that would be different? And the same thing happens on social media. Just this week, a really good colleague who's an executive functioning coach, I saw that she popped on Facebook that she's giving a talk So I shared that on my Facebook page, on my professional Facebook page, and sort of gave her a shout out. Because I do think she's great and she had great things to offer. That's part of social media and online networking. And then just one other example, just for everyone to take it home, because I really do think this is so important. On Twitter, there was a psychologist who has these great sort of like video series. It's called The Sachs Show. And I didn't know him, but I was watching his videos and was really impressed by them. And then when he popped a question on the listserv about a patient with autism, and since that's my specialty, I already felt like I sort of knew this professional from how he presented online. And, you know, I think I was more invested in how I answered his question, and even let him know, oh, hey, I really appreciate your videos. And from there, we actually started chit-chatting, and we realized there was a really good connection that could help his patient out. And he ended up making the referral to me, thinking I'd be a better fit, which was never my motive. But these are just all the ways that I think you can be giving and receiving and sort of synergistically with social media, but also in real life.
And I just want to add that Rebecca is a great natural connector. I mean, she's very outgoing. She's very natural. This is intuitive for her. It's not intuitive for a lot of people. I've written a lot of scripts for people in terms of how to call an office or speak to somebody. But it should go without saying that it's always about them. It's always like, here's my practice, but what I want to know is, who can I refer to you, or how can I help you? If you go to a school, what are your needs? Can I offer training to you? And in that way, then people are going to come around and say, oh, this person is really valid, is really terrific, and now I want to refer to them. So it's always about the other person first. Okay, so we've talked about these things to think about, and really the idea is that you're going to craft this unique profile so that you can stand out. And that profile, whether it's in your Psychology Today profile or in your brochures or on your website, you want to make sure that it's benefit-oriented, and you're going to put yourself in the mind of that user. Think about the calls you get and what are the things that people say. What are they asking for? And those are the questions you want to answer. You want to make sure, like we talk about keywords and website and social media, so you want to make sure if people say, I'm worried, I can't sleep, I'm really stressed out, then instead of using anxiety and agoraphobia, those types of words, you want, of course that's part of what you offer, but you want to make sure you're answering the questions of your user or your patient. Again, you really want to differentiate yourself, and that's why looking at your competitors is important, so you know how you can stand out, so you can sound different than they do, but still, of course, be authentic. Really define your expertise, so talk about what's relevant to people. If you wrote 15 papers in grad school 30 years ago, that's not necessarily as relevant as a comment from a colleague or a referral source who talks about why they refer to you, things like that. You want to be memorable and relatable. I can't speak enough about sort of that being relevant and resonating with your target audience, using patient-friendly language and minimizing the jargon and the buzzwords, which I know is really difficult for people, but really, really important. And it's kind of a new way of thinking. It's just putting yourself in the shoes of your users. And then, as Rebecca said earlier, you want to evaluate and change as your practice grows. If you're bringing on other clinicians, if you yourself are kind of changing or growing. So every year or two, you certainly want to go back and look at how you're positioning yourself and how it might be better.
Yeah, so, I see we're 25 minutes in, so I won't talk too long on that. The only thing that I would say is when I first started crafting sort of my online profile and who I was and trying really hard to minimize the jargon, it was difficult for me because it was a real shift. So one of the greatest resources that I had was relying on family and friends. That any content that I was putting up there, I asked them to read. And people who really were not psychologically or CBT or autism or OCD savvy, those were the people that I really wanted to read. And if they had questions or they were confused, then I knew I was not doing a good job, sort of what Helene talked about on the previous slide. And that was so, so helpful for me to sort of reconceptualize how do I want to speak about what I do and sort of demystify what I'm doing to make it really, really accessible to people. So I would encourage everybody, as you're going through this process, rely on the lay people in your life that you love and trust, because they can give you some of the best feedback out there as you're noticing what should I be putting content online and in social media.
Okay, great. All right, so a good website, we could do a whole webinar on websites, and I've already talked about some of these things, but again, that user experience, this is a new phrase in business, and it's really relevant to any type of business. In general, best practices for website is to minimize content and make it very visual. I would say with your audience, people who tend to be more anxious, they like a lot more content. So a web designer might say, oh no, you don't want to have much content, but your people read, especially those with anxiety and OCD. So you want to be careful, but you want to use bullet points. You want to have headers. So you want the content to be easy to follow, eye-catching. You want to make, it's really important that you have a call to action on each page, which makes it very easy for someone to contact you. So I can help you, we can help you, call today, or send an email, and just determine how you best want to be contacted. So if you're a solo practitioner and you don't answer your phone and you'd rather get an email than a call, make that clear. But every page, someone shouldn't have to hunt for your phone number or for your contact information. It should be on every page. And Rebecca and I have talked about this, that you want to, especially on mobile, you want to make sure your website is mobile friendly, and so that they click on the phone and they can call you directly, because the longer somebody waits, the less likely they are to call you. Again, the consistency with it, we've talked about with colors, fonts, and images. The social media we're going to be talking about, but if you're using those, you want to have links right on your site to social media. You always want it to open in a new page, because I will tell you, if you direct someone to Facebook, they might never come back. So you want to make sure when you're designing your website that it opens the link in a new page so you're still there in front of them. And if you provide supervision or consulting or seminars, you want to have structure your menu in a way that different people can read different types of content. So your content, if you do supervision, is going to be very clear. The writing on that section of your website is going to be very clear than the writing that's targeted to patients who aren't as sophisticated with psychological information. And you want it to be really easy to navigate. You want your payment information to be upfront, especially many of you don't accept insurance. You're gonna, not end up wasting time on the phone if you make it very clear what your policies are and your price points and things like that. If you have videos, you want to use that, and you just want to make it easy. I'm going to jump straight to Rebecca's front page of her website, and she can talk you through a little bit of that.
Sure. Just 3 points that I wanted to make that I think in some ways relate to my website, but what Helene was talking about is I think one of the really important things is knowing your audience and who you want to really reach, along with sort of what is your brand and who are you. So, yeah. Here's my webpage, here's my homepage, and it's interesting. I practice in Manhattan, right? Actually across the street from the Empire State Building. This does not look like Manhattan, but for me, I thought this image was really, really powerful. I thought it was calming. I thought it also evoked change and growth were the exact things that how I wanted to present myself as a brand, but also the kind of people that I were trying to reach. Those were their values and those were their goals. Now, I had a lot of images that I chose from. I narrowed them down, and I actually reached out to some current patients that I had when I was creating my website. And I said, you're under no obligation, only if you would find this task enjoyable. I'd love to know which image resonates with you the most. And I did, and I got good data on it. And it was really, really nice to know that if I'm trying to reach other people like my current patients, this is what they were going to enjoy and find visually inviting for them and meaningful for them. So that's one thing, know your audience. Along with know your audience is, as I was developing my website, I would say my website is a bit more content heavy than probably what the average good practices should be. And part of that was knowing my audience, knowing that I get a lot of patients who are coming to me sort of questioning, should they have a first-time diagnosis of autism or Asperger's, or parents of children with co-occurring conditions or OCD, and they really wanted a lot of information. So when I was developing this, I did get some pushback from Helene, and also I'm very, very lucky. My brother is an artist and a graphic designer, and he really was instrumental in helping me, and still is, with my website and logo and all those things. And he is a minimalist. Everything is less is more. So there was a lot of dialogue about what content was I putting up, how was I putting it up. I think ultimately there was a middle ground, and it was great to have those conversations. So I would say don't feel shy about having conversations and getting feedback, but also don't be worried that just because you're getting advice, that if you ultimately know your audience and you feel something important. What they did both really teach me, and you're welcome to go visit my website, is visually how to present the information, not just sort of have it be in paragraph form or a lecture, really sort of making things bulleted or italicized, things I really wanted to draw home. So that was really, really important. In terms of the call to action, so while I do have my information on the bottom, we've actually talked about, and I'm probably going to switch it, having my email more prominently than sort of the newsletter sign up, and perhaps even taking off my phone number. I find it's very difficult to return a lot of phone calls. It's far easier to return emails, and I've been slowly shifting people to email me more as first-time inquiries. So you may want to think about that in your call to action. Don't, in the same way, if you don't want to treat pans or pandas, if you're really not wanting to have a lot of time on phone calls, maybe just have your email as the call to action there, and have your phone number somewhere else. In terms of, having really clear, digestible information about payment, I just created a clearinghouse, like one section on my website that was all frequently asked questions, and can always direct people there, whether they're new or inquiring patients.
Right. Okay. So
Great.
I am going to move on because we could talk about websites forever, and quick points that I think Rebecca did a really good job of. She has 3 types of things that she treats, and so having the entry points of autism, anxiety, and OCD were very important. And again, think of your homepage is prime real estate, is your front door, and what do you want people to see first? And I remember we discussed the learn more about Dr. Sachs. I pushed you to have that on your homepage because the people want to know about the practice, but they really want to know about you. So you want to make it very easy for people to find out about you. But so just in terms of time, we're going to move on to your online presence and taking control of your online reputation. So as we've discussed, obviously your personal networking is really important, but when you talk about your online presence, you have a reputation. And if you Google yourself, hopefully you all have, you should definitely create a Google alert so that if you show up, if someone comments on you, creates a Yelp review or whatever, which somebody can create a Yelp review even if you haven't created a Yelp profile, so be aware of that. You definitely want to have alerts, and you want to be thoughtful with all your social media because, you know, I do this CDLP presentation, which I've met Rebecca in, and I always know the names of all the people who are going to be in the group, and I always come in with embarrassing information. I find people's wedding videos, their baby, pictures of babies, you know, comment their MySpace from middle school. So make sure you have cleaned and gone through your online profile, especially with your clients. You don't necessarily want them to know that much about you. So social media best practices, again, that professional consistency. There are a lot of times if you Google yourself, you might see that you're listed in a practice that you worked in 10 years ago. And so it's, you know, you can go in and claim profiles, make sure that the data is accurate because you don't want someone going to the wrong office because they went online and found your address, and it's not the online fault, it's then a reflection of you. Consistently using that profile, depending on which social media site you're using, you're going to tweak it depending on your target audience. And the privacy settings are hugely important. We'll talk about this a bit with Facebook, but make sure if you're on Facebook, view yourself as the public so you see how what somebody can find out about you and which images are public. And create a social media policy. Often people say, well, can people connect with me on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. I think to just have a policy, often people put it right on their forms to say I have a policy of not connecting on social media, which doesn't mean people can't follow you on Twitter or your business on Facebook, but I think you want to clarify that up front. Okay, so again, going into claim your free listing. If you haven't already, there's a Google My Business, and you want to go in and claim your business and make sure that the images that are there are not just the front door from the Google car that drives around, but an image that you want, your logo that you've carefully crafted, your photo, some photos of your office, not just 2 empty chairs and an orchid, but something that really is going to be warm and inviting. And being also 35% of searches come through Yahoo, so you want to make sure that you are found with those keywords that reflect your business. There's also Google Plus, a personal way. So the more places you can claim your profile online and direct people to your website, the better your search engine optimization. I'm sure you've all heard of SEO, which means that if somebody Googles whatever it is that you specialize in your city, that you're going to be more likely to pop up first. So go in and claim your site on all of these: health, grades, vitals, wherever you show up in your Google search. You can go to those sites and find it. It's hidden somewhere on the page, but it'll always say, is this you? Claim your profile, and often you have to put in license and information to clarify that it actually is you. But go in and take the time to do that, because when people Google you, if the health grades is the first thing that shows up and there's no photo and there's no link to your website and it's just aggregated information that may not even be accurate, that's still a reflection of your brand. Okay, so you also really want to update your organizational profiles, and this is really important. A lot of people don't pay much attention. I have looked up so many people on ADAA. I know you're probably all members of ADAA since you're here today. They don't have a photo. They say, I specialize in anxiety and depression, and that's it. And this is a searchable website, so people can go in here and look for a therapist, and you have the opportunity, you're already paying your dues, to create a profile that stands out. Certainly add your picture, add some information about what you do, and here it's a find a therapist, so speak to your users, speak to the potential patients. And it might even be worth joining some of these organizations that aren't, you know, maybe it's $150, $250, but you get one patient. It's a marketing investment basically, because they have the find a therapist tools, and it can be other ways for people to find you. And also don't forget to join local organizations. So if you have a local chamber of commerce, you create a profile or join for $99, whatever it is, you might be the only therapist listed there. And again, it allows you to stand out from your competitors.
Yeah, the things that I would add is some of the organizations also have like an expanded or an upgraded profile. Usually it's like $50 extra. I would say I think it's worth the investment, especially if you're in a big city where there are a lot of other practitioners. In a way, you slightly stand out a little bit more. And also just be careful of your wording about how you're putting your profile up to stand out a bit more. The other thing that Helene was really, really helpful with when I was figuring out, like, were there organizations and directories that I wanted to put myself on? Some organizations were no-brainers for me, but an organization like Autism Speaks, let's say, wasn't a no-brainer for me. There's a little controversy, which I won't get into, in sort of the autism practitioner world about how we feel about Autism Speaks. But what Helene really pointed out to me was that, you know, parents, that's often, you know, with the walk and the web presence and everything like that, that's one of the first things they think about when they think about autism and trying to find a practitioner. So I did put myself on the Autism Speaks website, and I have gotten a lot of really good inquiries from there, where not just to build my business, but that people were able to reach me and I could provide a service that I think otherwise they wouldn't have found me, and I wouldn't have been able to help this group of people that I really do want to help, and have them be able to reach me. So just things like that. I think like having an extra layer, or being able to think out of the box, or put some preconceived notions, and realizing that often there are things out there on the web and online and social media wise that may not seem like no-brainers to you, and to sometimes get an outside perspective is very, very helpful.
There's also a lot of free referral websites like Skin Pick, Trick Stop, Hoarding Help, and so if these are specializations that you have, you can just go to those websites, and they have listings of recommended practitioners, and basically if you ask, you can often get on those lists. So again, think of what is your specialty, what is your target market, and where are they going. And also the paid therapist directories. Psychology Today is only $360 a year, but I have clients in some cities where they get a ton of referrals because it's not as competitive. Others, like in New York, where it's really competitive, it's very hard to stand out. And also, if you're using these profiles, remember that someone's looking at a list of like 15 people, and your first 3 sentences, that's your prime real estate. That's where you have to capture somebody. So don't put the bulk of your good stuff in your second paragraph, because no one's going to see it. And if Theravive, Good Therapy, ZocDoc, are people in your community using these things? Sometimes it's worth trying something for a year, see if you get referrals, and if not, then just move on. So I see we're really late. We're going to jump. I'm just going to speed forward here. But, what are your goals when you're talking about social media? Because social media, as you'll find out that we're going to say, it can be a huge time suck, and you really want to make sure you only have a limited amount of time. Are you, is it accomplishing your goals? Do you need to fill your schedule? Are you looking for media attention? Are you hiring new staff? Are you looking for a new job? So there are different reasons to use social media. Don't get overwhelmed. Yeah. Just choose a few things and do them well. And I love this
Helene,
slide.
Just to let you know, time-wise, we're at 12:42, but the organizers sort of let me know we have, I would say, probably around like 10 minutes that we can keep on talking and then go to questions.
Thank you. Okay. So the top social networks we're going to talk about are LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And LinkedIn is really targeted to professionals. It can be very valuable if you're networking with referral sources, if you're starting out and trying to establish credibility, if you're searching for practitioners to join your practice, and if you're searching for a new job yourself. Facebook can be about promoting your brand. It can be most effective, I would say, for advertising events and groups. And allows you to share your expertise and a lot of information. And then Twitter is very crowded, obviously gets a lot of press these days, but you can create and share important content and become a thought leader, and also promoting things, and it allows you to make unique connections, which Rebecca will talk about when we get to Twitter. Just so I'm sure you've all seen on articles, it's very easy to share. See the little arrow there? I mean, usually there are social share buttons on almost every article that you see. So if you think, I don't know what to share, I mean, you're reading all the time, and it would be very easy if you create a Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook to share things just based on what you're reading in your day-to-day life. So with LinkedIn, go ahead.
So before we move on to LinkedIn, I just wanted to maybe have people think a little intentionally that it can be really overwhelming to say, I'm going to be, a jack of all trades and interface with all of these different things. What I would recommend is really taking the time, just as you thought about what's my brand, what's my target audience, what's my real goal in engaging in social media, and which one of these vehicles can best serve that goal. So for me, LinkedIn isn't necessarily serving a goal of what I want right now. So while I feel like I have a pretty decent LinkedIn profile that if someone were to Google and see it, that I don't do much engagement on LinkedIn right now, but that might work for other people. What I would say about social media that I found is I don't think you're going to get patients in the office or patient inquiries just from social media alone. What I have found through Twitter is that people maybe have heard my name and then go to my Twitter feed, and it sort of either verifies or unverifies my reputation. So that's sort of how I use Twitter, is if people heard about me and they want to learn more and they can see what is this person all about, they can go to my Twitter feed and sort of get a feeling from that. And then I have had people then sort of inquire and want to work with me about that. Facebook, I found more, is for other professionals, random strangers who maybe do want to access some information, but then also current patients or current patients' families. So thinking about how do I want to get content out. Maybe there were articles that in the past I would have thought belonged on my website, and now I pop them on Facebook, and I find it still gets to the people that I want them to. So don't get overwhelmed. Maybe pick one thing intentionally to start with that you think is going to serve you best, and then really become a master at that one.
And I would say so LinkedIn, I would encourage everyone to have a LinkedIn profile, to complete your profile, reflect your brand, because again, even if it's only a search engine referral source, if you're not using it to network, it's another place that a potential patient can find you, and also it's got all those keywords, so it's going to show up in a search possibly. So you want to have your LinkedIn completed, include, embed content, links, things like that. Especially if you're part of a group, and on your group you only have a little small paragraph to describe you. It's another place where you can really flush out your reputation and describe yourself. And people do post, just like on Facebook and Twitter, they post events, they share articles, newsworthy commentary. And again, it depends in your world, depending on your goals. If your potential patients or referral sources use LinkedIn a lot, then I'd spend more time on it. And if not, it may not be something you need to spend a lot of time on. Facebook, most important, you cannot have a business Facebook page without a personal page. So you have to create a Facebook page through your personal page. So that's why your personal privacy settings are really, really important. I know a lot of clinicians might not use their whole name. They change it, but really look at those privacy settings. And then if you have a business page, you want to develop a like acquisition strategy. Because if you only have 45 followers and they're all like your mother's best friends, then it's not worth spending time on Facebook. But if you have an event that you're promoting and it's in the schools and it's in this certain region, you might share it on your personal Facebook page, the event itself. You might ask people to share it. You could share it in those closed groups. And then when people come to your site and like it, then you can ask them, to become, there's a language they use. So you're inviting friends. You can invite friends to like your page and invite people who've made comments to like your page, so you start to grow it. And so if you don't have a lot of followers, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on Facebook, or I would start thinking intentionally about how to grow and with whom you want to grow. The closed groups I talked about a little bit, and make sure if you like and join other groups or other businesses, they're more likely to like and join you back. That's true both in Facebook and in Twitter. That's one way to increase your followers, like other local businesses, like other clinicians, things like that.
One important nuance of Facebook, since you're going to have a personal and a business page, is when you're commenting or when you're liking things, you'll want to make sure in your drop down, and you'll see it, like by the comments that you could be typing in, you'll just see like which, are you commenting as Rebecca Sachs, or are you commenting as like OCD Doc or whatever my Facebook name is. I think it's CBT Spectrum on Facebook actually. Is just make sure you're selecting your business one, because you might not want to be advertising what your personal name is. I would also say, even if you think your privacy settings on your personal page are sort of locked down solid, just to know your profile pic and your cover photo are always going to be visible to the public if somehow they find you, and that if anything, you'll want to clear past profile pics and cover photos unless you want the log of all of them. I found out the hard way that even though I'm unsearchable, even though I don't use my name, is I happen to be personally friends with the psychiatrist I work with. And his privacy settings are not lock solid. And so a patient of ours that we shared found him and saw through him my personal. And I happened to be like hugging my brother in the picture, where it was totally innocent. But the patient came in and was like, who's that guy you were hugging in your Facebook picture? And it really opened my eyes to, like, what do I want, knowing that my patients will see it, right. Which I was fine. I explained that to my brother.
Okay, so if you're going to be using Facebook, you want to post frequently, and you want to use that voice that we talked about, sharing important content. So again, it enhances your reputation. If you put photos and videos, those are going to be shared far more often than just sharing an article. And we're going to show you in a minute. There's a lot of data that's right in your profile, so you can see what's working and what isn't, and you can try different kinds of things. But it's really difficult to break through the Facebook algorithm. I follow all my clients, and I often post things for them, and they don't even come up in my feed. So it's really tough to break through, which is why if you have an event or you have something, you may want to boost it, which is like a paid ad, and we're going to show you that in a second. And if you have an event and there's other people there or other organizations, if you tag them on Facebook, so then it goes on their page. So the wider the dissemination of your information, obviously, the more valuable it's going to be. So this is a quick screenshot of Rebecca's Facebook page. And then I just, again, we talked about the consistency. She's got the same image, the same font, the same photo. But here is Facebook Insights. So this is telling you the type of post, what the reach was, what the engagement was, and then the opportunity is there to boost the post. So you want to talk about what happened with this?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll only speak briefly, and people can send their questions to either of us if they want to know more about Boost Post. I had put a post on, that's the second one down with a really big yellow line that shows it reached a lot more people. My postdoc fellow was doing a parenting group, and I put it on, and I figured it was worth boosting it, so I spent $10. I didn't realize it was so cheap to boost it, like the week leading up to it. And I definitely noticed that there were likes from strangers that I didn't know, and even there definitely was one or two participants who ended up coming to the parenting group who found out about it through Facebook, it seemed. So it definitely, I would think in this big city that I lived in, like, how am I going to reach people that I never thought of? It was slightly effective. Now, I'm not going to spend $10 on every post, but this was an event, and I thought it was really, really helpful. I have found just personally the most engagement comes when I have a visual that people really, really like, when something's slightly political, but without being overtly political, as well as I have noticed there are certain professionals out there who are real connectors. So when they like or comment on something, that I notice that my reach is far wider. So in some ways, when I've noticed that they've liked something, I may chit-chat with them offline. It's almost like bringing a person out to coffee and keeping, and engaging with their Facebook. Because one of the things Facebook does do, though, is you'll show up more in other people's feeds, and people will show up more in your feeds the more you're private messaging or the more that you're commenting on their pages. If you know someone's a good connector, you may want to, make sure you're commenting on their stuff or engaging in private message with them.
Right. And so this is just an example of, you can see for $20, the number of people you can reach, you can determine how much you want to spend, and then you can define your audience. So like at the bottom, the local moms 26 to 50, in this case that was appropriate, but you can pick geography, age, and interests. And so that can be a way, if you're just dabbling in Facebook, to really inexpensively try some posts, especially if you have some events coming up, and see what's effective, and then go back and revise. So we're going to move quickly to Twitter. Rebecca is at autismdoc. We spend a lot of time deciding what her profile name or her Twitter name should be, and that way, if someone's searching on autism, she's going to be more likely to show up. So you only have so many characters, but you want to spend a little time making your Twitter name relevant to what you do. Twitter can be really overwhelming. And again, your Twitter feed is only going to show you what Twitter thinks you want to see, so it can be really hard to break through. The more people you follow, the more people will follow you back. So if you like Twitter and you like sharing information, you want to do that. It will increase the number of followers, and you want to have keywords and hashtags. So if somebody's going to go in and search autism or CBT works or anxiety, that you include that hashtag. You don't want to have 15 hashtags, just 2 or 3 is going to be effective. And you can be the curator. You're going to share relevant information. It can be helpful for your reputation. I don't think it's going to draw a lot more patients to your practice ultimately, but it can have other purposes. If you mention others in your tweet. So if you tweeted today that you saw this webinar and tweeted to both of us, then we might like it and share it, and people that we see might like it and share it. And so you can expand your reach. But I mean, I know people who are tweeting every day and they have 100 followers, and honestly, I would spend my time elsewhere. So think of your goals. If you're going to use it effectively. Tweet, retweet stories, and connect, like Rebecca said, with the connectors. Target those influencers. I'm just going to pull up Rebecca's screen if you want to make some comments about Twitter.
Sure. I'm going to make, I think we have 1 more minute. We have 2 questions. So I think we do have enough time to get to those questions. I would also just encourage people to have fun with it. If at any point this is feeling like work and burdensome or taking away from your job, then I would say maybe you're not using it in the best way. I've seen some people get really, really overwhelmed by Twitter, or they're constantly tweeting stuff. But again, I find it's helpful. I've connected with people, you know, internationally, and even then popped on a Skype call and had conversations with other professionals that I know I never would have met unless we had connected on Twitter. So it's been very exciting. There are some really great vehicles out there through Twitter.
Oh, and you'll see this.
The only other,
oh, go ahead.
No, the only other thing that I think I would add is, you know, I was fortunate to be invited to speak on 2020 as an expert on autism. And when I asked how they found me, they said another professional had recommended my name along with a few other psychologists. But when they saw my Facebook and my Twitter feed and my website, they felt very confident in reaching out to me. So just if you're interested in doing that kind of stuff, doing more kind of press, I would say, and trying to get TV spots or radio shows, that's where I also think having a Twitter feed can be very, very helpful to you in establishing who you are and making those connections.
And then I always tell people, if you're speaking nationally, if you're you know, reported on in the New York Times or something, but your practice is in the middle of Ohio, you'd still might be better off going to the local PTA and doing a presentation than spending time on this. So it depends on your own goals. I would take a look at Simon Rigo, who's a big ADAA superstar, and he has 37,000 followers, and he's always quoted in the media, and it begets itself. And so he was in a story that about a Taylor Swift song, Taylor retweeted it, you know, then he had thousands more followers. So that's how it can work. But again, is it going to help you in your practice and your goals? Additional social media options. YouTube, if you have videos, you certainly want to create a YouTube page and post them, and people may go there. Again, it rounds out your reputation. It's another place you can have your link to your website and help you with SEO. Instagram is very visual. I don't think it was really created for your industry. There are some people that use it. I think people who are relationship counselors and have inspirational quotes and images, and if that's what you like, great. But I don't know that it's going to get you a lot more patients. And Snapchat, working with teens, if I would just move on. So basically, to summarize, you know, there's a lot of metrics out there that you want to use. If you're using any of the social media, you always want to see what's working and what isn't to see if it's worth your time. And Google Analytics is going to help you draw people to your website. You want to see the source of people coming to your website. Sounds like we have questions now. This is just a summary of what we've talked about. I'm sorry we were so rushed at the end. This is the first time we've done this in a webinar format, but I hope it's valuable. We're both available to answer questions, and our contact information is here. Feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any questions, and look at Rebecca's. You know, Rebecca's done some great branding work, so she's a wonderful example of how to do things right. So.
Thank you very much, Eileen and Rebecca. We are now going to be answering the questions that were submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions to the chat panel in your attendee control panel. Here is the first question from the audience. I led a variety of different patients, some more stable than others. I'm sometimes concerned that a dissatisfied patient will give me a bad review online. How should we handle that?
So I would say that's why it's really important to manage your online reputation. Because if you are listed with all your qualifications, with your great website, with your great profile that you have created in 30 different places online, and there's one bad review, it minimizes the impact of that review.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Our second question, should we hire someone to do our website, or do you think it would be okay to do it ourselves?
Do you want me to speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of how much time do you have, how savvy you are. what I will, and look, again, I was so fortunate that while I did pay my brother for his time, it was someone who I just organically trusted from the beginning. I knew that they weren't going to overcharge me, and I also knew how really good he was and his vision. So I got really fortunate that way in my website and my logo design. I've spoken to other people out there, and there are often these big companies that promise you a lot, that promise you SEO and the logos, and they charge thousands and thousands of dollars. I have not met one clinician who has been happy with the money they've spent when it has been a very big price tag. This has not been, from my experience, a matter of you get what you pay for. I have found that there are a lot of amazing graphic artists or people who do really good website design on things like Squarespace, simple platforms that you can find for far more affordable. So I would maybe, if you do see a website you really, really like, whether it's someone you met at a conference or you start Googling, reach out to them and say, like, where did you get your website from? And I think that would be very, very helpful if you're thinking about how to invest your money and your time, is think about sort of what your ability is, what your savviness is, what's your time to go in there. But one of the nice things about, I was involved in my website process, and it's a very simple platform I use. It's nothing that I can go in personally and make changes if I want to pop something in on the fly or add a new piece of information. And that felt very empowering to me, that I could just do it, as well as then I also had someone out there who, if I wanted to outsource a bigger thing or a bigger change or add a page, like when I got a postdoc as it grew, that I had someone trusted there who could do that development for me. So I would even say think locally rather than these big companies.
And I would say that, you know, I have clients who've done it themselves, and I have clients who've spent $25,000 on, you know, a master website. And, you know, I think there are some things that good web designers do that you can't do yourselves, and some of that is the descriptions, the meta descriptions, the SEO, the keywords, things like that, that if you're just doing it yourself, you're not necessarily coding the pages for optimal search and view. So a good web designer can do that. I think it's also really, really important to incorporate the practices that we've discussed today. So a lot of times people, you can write content, you're all great writers, but making sure that it's easy to navigate, and that's where a good web designer can come and help you, but also make sure, you know, if a web designer specializes in manufacturing, they're not attuned to the nuances of working with your population. And so that's where I think it's important. Often I work with a web designer who's really good at web design, but they haven't thought about how your clients use a website, how it should be structured, and what's important, and what the keywords and all those other pieces that drive to the website are really helpful and really valuable.
Thank you very much. We actually have a third question. When branding, is it better to use a company name rather than my own name, one's own name?
You know, I think that's a really good question. I think it depends on your name, honestly, in some cases. And if you already have an established reputation, at that point it might not make sense to change your name because people know you as Joe Smith or whatever. If you're just starting out and your name doesn't have any cachet, then you might want to choose a practice name that is going to attract the kind of people that's going to be relevant to your audience.
And I would add it not just to think about sort of where you've been and where you currently are, but what do you really want for yourself and your career and your practice in the future? That was one of the reasons why I chose CBT Spectrum as opposed to RebeccaSachsPhD.com. One is there are a lot of Rebecca Sachses out there, so I didn't think that was going to distinguish me so differently in a Google search versus CBT and Spectrum, even though that probably is all over the place. What I did think is that while I was starting off as a solo practitioner, my vision was in the next 10 years to be building not just a personal brand, but more of a brand where I'm really invested in training other people. There aren't a lot of people who do my niche, and I purposely want to train more clinicians to do it, and I wanted to be able to still have future clientele not just want to work with me, but want to work with sort of this thing that I was creating. And that was tough to sort of figure out in my first year when I didn't even know, was I going to fill a practice? But I sort of just said, what do I really, really want? And that was part of my decision making. So there's a lot of things I would say, and it really depends on what you want as a practitioner.
And I would also say, if you have a group and your name is on the group, then most of the people who call the group are going to want to see you. And so if your goal is to have a group and have other clinicians, you can always have the name of the practice, and it can be, you know, Dr. Rebecca Sachs, Director, or Dr. Rebecca Sachs, and Associate. So your name is tied to your practice name, but it isn't your practice name, because then it can be difficult to refer patients when they're calling and they only want to see you. That can be very difficult in groups.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Eileen and Rebecca, and to our participants today. You will receive a follow-up email in the next 48 hours that includes a link to the webinar evaluation and a link to the recording of the webinar. Thank you for taking a moment to share your feedback with us. I would also like to let you know that our second webinar in the Career Development Series will be on December 15th about alternative strategies for successful careers in academic medical research by Dr. Bruce. And our third webinar will take place on May 24th on using social media and other creative tools to build mentorship and confidence as an early career professional, featuring Dr. Bielek. We hope you will join us at the Anxiety and Depression Conference next April 2018, April 5th to 8th in Washington, D.C. On behalf of ADAA and our presenters, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.